All right, well, I have 8:01, so let's get started. Welcome everyone to our July PI and coordinator call. I hope that you all are staying safe wherever you are and hopefully enjoying some family time, albeit maybe in a different capacity this year than in prior years. Next slide. Our agenda for this morning, as always, we'll start with a recruitment update. We'll talk about our plans for the interim analysis, which should be occurring later this summer and into the early fall. Discuss a couple COVID-related reminders, tell you about an important staff change, and hopefully save some time at the end to crowdsource what it is that you would like to talk about at the upcoming fall community conference, which I believe will be a virtual conference as well. Next slide. So we are nearing the 300 mark. We have 297 patients randomized as of July 20th. We have one more patient at our site who has expressed interest, and I suspect we should be able to consent and randomize this week. Hopefully, if you all have activity at your sites, we should be able to hit the 300 mark before the end of July. We have 35 sites who have now recruited at least one patient, which is really quite an amazing feat. I'd like to shout out a couple of sites who have randomized patients since the COVID epidemic. Two patients were randomized in April at Wisconsin and Michigan, and last month CHKD randomized a patient as well. So keep recruiting. We definitely are open for business. I know that COVID-19 has certainly changed how we care for patients, and certainly with a lot of the institutional restrictions on staffing and even research and trials has sort of changed the way that we are doing research, but Combine has always been open to new enrollment. We nest the Combine study within routine clinical care, and so we have to be even more creative with Combine and Combine enrollment as we are getting more creative clinically with the use of virtual visits and other telehealth type care. Next slide. So again, we have had a slow and steady recruitment as shown in blue, which is our number of randomized patients, and orange, which is our number of consented patients. A few patients that we've consented have been ineligible, but we fall short of our target as shown in green. And again, the last couple of months have not been completely flat, but relatively flat due to COVID. We project having recruitment open through the end of the fall, so we really are trying to squeeze as much as we can over the next couple of months. So please, please, please regroup with your centers. It seems like we're going to be in this COVID stuff for the long run, but that said, we continue to diagnose new IBD, new Crohn's, we continue to follow patients, we continue to initiate patients on anti-TNF, and all of these are opportunities for combined randomization. So as we enter this new reality, let's continue to make Combine a forethought rather than an afterthought. Next slide. This here shows our recruitment by site. Thanks to all of you who are on the left of this figure, but I would like to challenge all of our sites to recruit at least one or two new participants before we close enrollment towards the end of 2020. Next slide. We are just getting ready to start our planned interim analysis. Next slide. And so from the beginning of the project nearly 5 years ago, we had planned an interim analysis after 76 patients experienced a primary endpoint indicating either treatment failure or medication toxicity. We've just passed that threshold. 79 patients have experienced a study outcome. For your reference, that's 27% of those patients randomized. And again, not even all of our randomized patients have completed follow-up. So this is, right about what we were expecting in terms of the proportion of patients who met a study endpoint and therefore had to discontinue study treatment. Next slide. Here are the outcomes that patients have met in order of frequency. Those of you who have had your morning coffee will note that the total here of 117 far surpasses the 79 shown on the prior slide. That's because these are the first outcomes that a patient has met, but many patients have met 2 or more outcomes on the same day. For example, a patient who was hospitalized and had abdominal surgery after 25 would be counted in both of those as both of those outcomes. Next slide. And so we definitely need your help with the interim analysis. We definitely need you to help respond to queries later this month or in August. I know that this is a busy month for vacation and whatnot, but we really need as good and as accurate and complete data as possible so that we can do this interim analysis with as much rigor as certainly we can. And I'm going to pass it over to you to take us through the next series of sort of operational slides about the interim analysis and about COVID and whatnot.
Great. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Anne.
Okay, good. Okay. So, yes. So we, as you know, Kat has been super busy with querying patients or querying the sites. So we are hoping that you can help us out by responding to those, and most of you have already, so we really super appreciate it. If you have any questions about what you have outstanding or what you need to complete, then we can compile a data cleanup list that will have all of the outstanding queries for you. So just go ahead and email either Kat, myself, or Margie. Probably all 3 of us would be great. And we can get you your own personal data cleanup list. And that would be super helpful if you enter all of that information before our database lock. So I've emailed several of you already about updating patient status. Now there are a couple of sites or a couple of patients that had initially been lost to follow-up, say they didn't attend their last visit 10, but then later on we found out that there was a visit 10. So they had initially been marked as lost to follow-up, and we need to have those changed to completed instead. So that will make a big difference in our end date. And also, if you have any patients out there that have finished their visit 10 and are not continuing into year 3, please ensure that you do complete that study completion early termination form and mark your patients as having completed the study. Next slide, please.
And let's pause before the next slide. Any questions at all about the study completion case report form or anything else that Anne just mentioned? It really is sort of from a record keeping perspective. The more patients who have had a visit in that time window that we can count as completed rather than lost to follow up, the better our study flow figure is going to look, and the more confidence readers will have in our study findings. So before Anne moves on, if any of you have questions, either unmute or put it into the chat box. Otherwise, we'll let Anne continue. And I'm not hearing or seeing anything, so continue on.
Yep. Okay. So another reminder to PIs to certify all your outcomes. If you have a patient that you know has met a study outcome, but I haven't contacted you yet to certify, please reach out to me so we can get those patients certified as having met the outcome. There are a couple of sites where I've requested some outstanding certifications. So if you can get those signed off and sent back to me as soon as possible, that would really, really help also in order to make sure that we have all of these end dates correct. So next slide, please. Okay, so I wanted to go through, we've been having some different questions and things coming up as we're all learning this new way of dealing with Combine and COVID. So I just wanted to go through and remind you of some of the tools and items that we have set up for you to help you manage this time in your workload. Next slide. Okay, so we have all these tools. They should all be up at on the SharePoint site. Also, if it's easier for you to just reach out to me, and I'll be happy to send any of these tools or instructions to you personally. So we do have the coronavirus phone checklist that will help you with all the items that you're able to get through virtual visits. These are the ones that we hope that the questions that you can ask virtually, and all the pieces of data that would count as a full study visit, even though we're not able to do some of the exams or some of the other items that we would if we were. So this checklist has all, piece by piece of the questions that you can ask, the data that can be collected. Plus, we also have our standard operating procedures that outline all of these new things for you also. Also, the PROs can be collected online, as many of you know already. There's that you can send to your patient to have them complete it themselves, or you can ask the questions over the phone. So I'll go over a little bit more of that on our next slide. And we are also collecting our research labs again. So the research samples that you collect are, if you're able to collect those, then please do for visits for visit 9. And if you are able to collect them, please email the lab and let them know that you're sending a sample, because a lot of the labs are working either part-time or just on certain days. So if they know to expect a shipment, they will make sure that they're there to collect it. Also, if you're sending any items to the minor lab, this would be for the Visit 9 labs, Visit 9 or Visit 10, collections that you might be sending to Cincinnati, please include the patient's age with these samples. They have a new way of processing these. They're being processed through another laboratory, and that lab requires the patient's age in order to be able to create, good results. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is an example of what the phone checklist looks like. So again, we have this in a document, email if you'd like a copy of it, and it's pretty self-explanatory once you see it. Next slide. Okay, back to the PROs. So again, they can be collected by phone or online. Please go ahead, if you are sending the link to your patient, you can check back with me to see if they have completed. I try to go into the PRO database about every other day or so just to check, and I will reach out and let you know when your patients have completed the PRO, but don't assume that they've completed it until you get a confirmation email from me. And if you are sending the email link to the patient, make sure that you include this information with the link so that they know how to input their study ID, excuse me, what their visit number is, and how to answer those initial questions. You can also opt to answer these questions to run the survey yourself, going over the phone, and then you would just choose the interviewer administered option. And as usual, you can either send them through the US mail or collect them in person. All of these are options to get these PROs in. Next slide. Okay, and I think as many of you know already, we are having some staff changes that are going to be effective the end of this month, actually next week. So next slide. We want to congratulate and thank Catalina. She has been accepted to UNC Medical School. She actually starts, I believe, on next Tuesday. So she is working right up until her very last day. And she has been in the process of training Margie, who is going to try and fill some very big shoes. Please continue to help us as you have with Kat, help Margie gather all this great documentation that we need. Next slide. And I'm going to send this back to you, Mike, to talk about the Fall Community Conference. This is the time that we would really like some help in brainstorming some ideas on what you'd like to see, how you'd like it presented. Think of us in the virtual mode. Yeah, next slide. Let's talk about what we can help you with during our combined session.
Yeah, so I think Anne sort of gave the intro for this. I'm gonna ask you all if you wouldn't mind to unmute and tell us what you would like to hear or what sort of content you'd like us to present or discuss at the virtual community conference. Either speak up or put your ideas into the chat box. As you all know, we've been at Combine now for 5 years. We'll be wrapping up recruitment and continuing on with follow-up, and want to make sure that our final year is as strong and as productive as possible. So please let us know what you'd like us to focus on at the upcoming community conference, or if there's any other questions or comments or big picture ideas that you have at this point in the Combine life cycle, please let us know. Let's see, potentially a comment in the chat box. Yes, we definitely will share any results we have related to the interim analysis, as well as any of the data issues that we've uncovered in the process of the interim analysis, and any other data that we have in terms of follow-up outcomes, all of that as Brendan had put into the chat box. So. For sure, we can present a lot of information to you. What else other than us presenting and sharing sort of status updates? What else do you want to hear or focus on at the community conference? When we've met in person at community conferences, we've tried to make the sessions interactive. Obviously, a little bit harder with the virtual format. Let us know. Are you interested in trying to make this interactive, or do you really want this to be informational and more of a formal presentation? Unclear, unsure.
Well, I just put a comment in the chat box would really like to hear from some centers about how some of the wins that they had during the participation in the 5-year trial and some of the barriers that they really would bring to the attention, so that whenever we have the opportunity to do the next trial, we can think about it and plan for mitigation.
Yeah, we can certainly build that in.
So we'd want some volunteers for that. Otherwise, we'll volunteer.
I was going to say, Shahzad, your job will be to volunteer a few friends to share their stories. All right. Did we have any other slides or anything else we wanted to cover today, Anne? What's the next slide? That was it. Great. And I'm gonna go off script for a little bit. Do you have any sort of high-level updates for the sites that are still on the call in terms of site contracts and site payments, and roughly when to expect all of the deficient payments and next year's contract from Cincinnati?
Well, Kat can help us verify this, but I believe that all of the quarter, everything should be up to date. As of, I think things were sent out the end of June. So if you haven't received, if your site hasn't received checks, or you want to ensure that your site has received all checks that were supposed to come to you, then you can reach out to myself or to Kat to get that information for you. We have by site, how much you should have been paid, when you should have been paid, and all of that. So there are a few sites that have not sent in their year 5 contracts. We are not able to we're not able to send out payments until we have that contract, that signed contract in hand. So we have reached out to those sites to ensure that we get that contract before they can get their payments. But otherwise, everything should be all up to date on that.
So now would be a good time to review with your site finance teams and make sure that all of the checks that were mailed have been cashed and deposited into the correct trial accounts. Some sites from time to time have had missing checks, and so we can send you a summary of all of the checks you should have received from the beginning of time until June 19th, and you all can make sure that they've been deposited in the correct accounts at your centers. So if you want any information about that, please reach out to us.
And I've also received some questions about year 6 contracts. So for this new year, additional follow-up year that was added, yes, all sites will be getting a new contract effective November 1st of 2020 for year 6, our final year of follow-up. So those should be coming out probably in, I think, October or late September.
Excellent. Well, I think we're a couple minutes early, and we'll let everyone get started with their clinic and rest of their days. Thanks all for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.